It feels like a lot of people on this panel, or some people on this panel, believe that gender and sex are wholly arbitrary things that are like, not only are they ill-defined, you actually can't define them. That the concept of sex or gender literally escapes definition because there might be some exception to the rule or whatever, that these things are indefinable. And my challenge to that is it feels like there does seem to be some sort of internal identification with this concept that makes it so that you can't just simply say, oh, well, sex and gender are just totally not real things. We can abolish them and they could just be names we give ourselves. It seems that that would be contrary to what most people feel internally. And then my example for that is that one is you get kids that have like botched sex reassignment surgeries at birth. They go through life feeling miserable, even if they're socialized a certain way, and then they end up killing themselves. The one example that Vivian brought up, I wish I could remember the name of this case, really popular. Or the idea that people, even in a society where there are no gender expectations, would still feel like a trans person. They would still feel like there's some fundamental mismatch between their body's characteristics and the gender that they identify with internally, or the sex even they identify with internally.
Okay,
I'm sorry if I missed the opening of this, but when has anyone said that sex is undefinable?
I know at the very least, Demon Mama was saying that. Or am I wrong on that, Demon Mama? You're not saying that?
Oh my God.
Wait, hold on, Joe. Wait, am I crazy? Oh shit, Joe.
Listen, so, okay. God, like, first of all, no, I don't. I mean, I do believe that all things that we use that are linguistically are to some degree a social construct, to a certain degree. Obviously, there are very different parameters for those things. This is just a fact of language. Humans communicate by making constructs.
I'm talking about human language.
Right. Well,
we have to be if we're talking.
No, we're not. I'm talking about the concept of gender, if that exists.
You're clearly confused. Just let me explain. I'll make it clear. Like the fact of the matter is, like, I do believe that sex has like sex is useful as a biological term to some degree. I think we can go back and forth about how we define that, and scientists have and are. But sex is a descriptor of biological processes, some of which we do not fully understand yet. Gender is, in my opinion,
dude, these people talk for so long. It takes them like 20 sentences just saying like one sentence. I don't know why.
Well, no, but there does seem to be. And I don't believe that there is as much of a connection as some people think. For example, our society has predominantly assumed that gender.
And then they always go off and they give like, well, for example, it's like, we don't need the example. I understand what you said. I don't know why you're giving an example. And then the example just obfuscates the main point even more.
And blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's the case. I think that many people have all of these different tastes, and that we should move these things apart, that gender is better understood as a concept of identity, of social interaction, and that we don't really use it, like, we don't really use gender like all that much in a meaningful way. That we should make it more useful by acknowledging that this is a part of identity. Now,
okay, how does it make sense? I don't understand.
Wait, hold on. I'm not done yet. So, let me pull from personal experience. Now, previously, there was a social expectation in my mind about what a woman is, and that definition included needing to have a vagina or a vulva, or however you want to use the terminology, okay?
Right.
I no longer believe that.
You still internally wanted to be a woman.
No, wait.
Right?
What I don't understand is when we were specifically saying that anybody can call themselves any gender they want. How can you? How does that view matching what you're saying now? You're saying, so earlier you said anybody can call themselves any gender they want, or anybody can identify as anything. But now you're saying, well, hold on, maybe there is some underlying fact of the matter. How are these two definitions congruent?
Destiny, you're missing the difference between sex and gender. Like, this is the core problem that's happening.
I'm only talking about. Hold on. Stop. First of all, I'm only talking about sex right now. Okay, we'll just exclusively talk about sex. Do you agree that like sex exists as some like actual like definable category that people understand?
Yeah, to some degree, yes, of course. Obviously, it is a real thing.
Okay. Do you think that gender is somewhat like causally abstracted off of sex, or no?
No, not really.
I would say it's correlative.
I mean, I think there's.
So the fact that like 98% of people are cisgender, like doesn't.
Hold on a second. You asked me a question. I want to answer the question.
Okay, please do it without anecdotes and analogies, and just answer the question.
Oh, quit whining. When did you become such a whiny?
It's so boring because you guys take like 3 minutes to answer a question instead of just like giving the answer. It's so annoying.
I'm sorry. Sorry. I couldn't give you a one-sentence definition.
You can give me as many sentences you want. I just don't need like 50 analogies to bodybuilding or anecdotes. Just like give the answer.
I'll jump in. I'll take longer than both of you combined. Okay.
So it felt like earlier all of us were saying because I think Joe was arguing that there must be some definition of woman, whether we're talking gender or sex. I think earlier you guys were talking sex, but I guess we can say sex or gender, right? For either of these. It seemed like Joe was arguing that there was some underlying definition that people seemed to understand internally, but then it felt like Demon Mama, your argument was like, well, no, literally anybody could call themselves any gender they want and it would be okay. It should be a descriptor like a name. That was the comparison that you used.
Yeah.
But now it sounds like you're saying, well, there is some underlying fact of the matter related to gender.
For gender, I don't believe that sex and gender. I think that in our society right now, we erroneously ascribe gender as something that like grows out of sex. I don't think that's the case. Actually.
Okay, if that's not the case, then how do we deal with the kids? How do we? Okay.
I know
how do we deal with the kids that get the surgery and are intersex to somebody else and then end up killing themselves?
Wait, that's a sex thing. Wait, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Yeah.
We really need to split this line right here, okay? Sex is real. It is, to an extent, arbitrary. It is not binary. There's a bimodal component.
You just said the same thing like 3 times. We understand. Go. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, just to hammer it in, because it keeps coming up again, gender, well, that's a lot more complicated. I think that gender is broadly just another social category that allows us to express who we are. Most people are okay with the category.
So this is my question. This is my question. I want to hear an answer to this. Wait, I need to hear an answer to this, and I'll shut the fuck up.
Yes,
I just want to know an answer. Okay, I'll shut up for the. I swear to God, I'll shut up for the rest of the panel. Okay, then for Jack, I'll shut up for the rest of the panel. Because we keep dancing around this so much, and people want to like hop to every definition to avoid answering this question. Okay. If you were to take somebody, please don't call me performative. Okay, everything is a performance. My understanding is that if you were to take a kid at birth, okay, and you were to just SRS them to another sex, okay, and they were to grow up, that gender, that's not just a performative thing. That's not just a social thing. That there is some internal content there related to gender, and that person will grow up with dysphoria and kill themselves. It wasn't just a matter of having the right sex parts or whatever, that there's like some deeper gender content there.
So like there are these ideas, but when you get down to it, we don't know what makes people trans, and we don't know what makes people react the way they do, because it's a complicated topic. And it's kind of what I was trying to get at when I talked to you earlier, and was just like, the more you know about somebody, the more complicated it gets.
This is a physiological phenomenon. This would happen on a desert island.
Yeah, but when I know, but I'm going a step further, and I'm saying it seems like gender is physiological as well. That seems to be the case, that it does trace to some part of the brain. And when we talk about like the research,
what is gender? What do you mean by gender? We're doing it again.
What are we doing? No one is conflating sex and gender. Stop saying that.
Wait, hold on, wait. This is more complicated.
Okay,
please.
Yeah, and harmony implies that there's like a match between two things, and it seems like we're denying the existence of that internal thing, which is some gender identity. And yeah, I guess the problem I'm having.
What is the internal thing?
The internal thing, it seems to be that we have some internal feeling of like gender.
Yeah.
Well, we have some internal. Well, gender means a million things. We have some internal feelings
I don't
about
think
ourselves.
I think we have an internal I think that there is like some internal feeling of gender that we seem to understand as two different things in society.
When you say
in a practical sense, what is gender there?
Because it's all become clear. It's all become clear that there is no puzzle about this universe. What makes you think there are puzzles about this universe? Very simple reason. You're trying to explain it. And when you explain things, what do you mean by explanation? There are several meanings of explanation. There's really one basic meaning. But first of all, to be able to translate what is happening into terms of words or numbers. In other words, to describe. But a real explanation is not just a description. It's a description which enables us to control what we are describing. But didn't we see in the last session that to control the world is not really what we want to do? So that if all explanations have as their function enabling us to control things, then maybe an explanation isn't what we wanted. And furthermore, you can very simply see that what makes things complicated is explaining them. When somebody explains to you how a flower works, and he's a great botanist, and analyzes all the innards of a flower, and shows the channels, the fibers, the processes of reproduction, and so on that go on in it, everybody stands fascinated. Said, how complicated that is. How clever God must have been to create that flower, to have all that complexity going. It isn't complicated at all. It's only complicated when you start thinking about it. Because the vehicle of words is a very clumsy one. And when you try to talk about the processes of nature, what is complicated is not the processes of nature, but trying to put them into words. That's as complicated as trying to drink up the ocean with a fork. It takes forever. And so this intense complexity that we see in everything is created by our attempt to analyze it all. And so what we do is, you see, when we analyze, we use our eyes and ears as scalpels. And we dissect everything. And we have to put a label on every piece we chop off. And so we scalpelize and we get it right down to atoms, getting finer and finer, and we suddenly thought, well, we've got to the end of it, because the word atom means what is not cuttable. Atomos. But then we found we could cut the atom. And lo and behold, big fleas had little fleas upon their backs to bite them. And it goes on forever. There is no end to the minuteness which you can unveil through physical investigation. For the simple reason that the investigation itself is what is chopping things into pieces. And the sharper you can sharpen your knife, the finer you can cut it. And the knife of the intellect is very sharp indeed. And the sophisticated instruments that we can now make, well, there's probably no limit to it. But in a way, all that is vain knowledge. In a way. Because you see, what it does is, it gives you the illusion that you've solved your problems. When you have controlled certain things and you have solved certain problems, practical problems, you say, fine, more of that, please. Let's go on solving problems. And then you do. And you create a world of people, as we are today, far more comfortable than people who lived in the 19th century. Just remember the troubles of going to a dentist when you were children, or some of you when you were children, of medicine, of badly heated homes, of all sorts of things that we don't put up with anymore. But the problem is we keep running into this thing that all constant stimulations of consciousness become unconscious. And when we take it as a matter of course to have certain comforts, then we switch the level on which we worry. When you solve a whole set of problems, people find new ones to worry about. And after a while, you begin to get that haven't we been here before feeling. Aren't we just going round on a cycle and doing the same old thing over and over and over again because we don't realize that we're chasing our own tails? By an eternally recurrent process of not knowing who you are. That is the hide and seek. That is the nature of what the Hindus call the Manvantara and the Pralaya, the period of the Manvantara in which the worlds are manifested, and the period of the Pralaya in which the worlds are withdrawn from manifestation. In and out, in and out. Evermore came out by the same door as in I went. And the thing is, to get to the point where you can see that you are doing that in every moment of your existence, with every tiny little atom of your body, you now, at this minute, you see, are the whole system of inning and outing. In other words, you often think perhaps, maybe a long, long time ahead, I shall reach the point where I wake up from manifestation and overcome the world illusion and discover that I am the supreme reality behind all this diversification. My friends, there is no diversification. in other words, what you call diversification is your game. In the same way as you chop the thing and then you say it is made of pieces. Because you forget that you cut it. And so when you see the world as complicated and that there are life problems and that you might one day succeed. See, hundreds and hundreds of people are running like mad after something that they call that is success, and they have no idea what it is. So in exactly the same way, the guru is keeping you running and running after spiritual attainment. You don't know what you want. This is where Krishnamurti is so clever. Because he says, if you ask me for enlightenment, how can you ask me for enlightenment? If you don't know what it is, how do you know you want it? Is that any concept you have of it will be simply a way of trying to perpetuate the situation you're already in. If you think you know what you're going out for, all you're doing is you're seeking the past, what you already know, what you've already experienced. Therefore, that's not it, is it? Because you say you're looking for something quite new. But what do you mean new? What's your conception of something new? Well, you figure I can only think about it in terms of something old. Something I once had. So he doesn't say anything. He doesn't indicate anything positively. Everybody says, why are you so negative? Why don't you give us something to hang on to? Well, the simple answer is it would be spurious. You don't need anything to hang on to. You're it. You don't need a religion. But then you say, well, what is all this religious stuff about then? Why don't we just forget it? You can try. By all means. Just go away. Don't go to gurus. Don't go to church. Don't enter philosophical discussions. Forget it. But then you'll realize that by having consented to forget it, you're still seeking. What a trap. What can you do? You see, if you stay here and listen to me or to anyone else who comes around here, you're fooling yourself. But if you go away, you're fooling yourself too. Because you still think that's going to improve your situation. It won't. And therefore, when you discover that it doesn't, you'll think, well, maybe it was a mistake to go away, and you come back to the guru. And he looks at you and says, you are very undisciplined, very inferior student. And you need to apply yourself. Well, as I explained what he's doing. But it comes down in a way to a sort of contest with the guru. You see? Will you call his bluff? You're afraid to. Because you might discover that if you do call his bluff, he's no better than you are. Well, that's what you're supposed to find out. But without being cynical about it. He's as divine as you are. But you've got to call the bluff. There's going to be a showdown. And it's a double bind. The whole situation's a double bind. Because it doesn't do any good to stay here, and it doesn't do you any good to go away. Either to do something about it or to do nothing about it. Now then, there's something else. When you understand that, and when you realize that there's nothing to realize, because it's all here, then what are you going to do? Well, of course, this is the sense of the Zen poem. Supernatural activity and marvelous power. Drawing water, carrying fuel. You know? Do whatever one does as a human being. But there's a little element of Philistinism in that. It's like when a child is pestering father or mother with all sorts of questions. They finally get down to the deepest metaphysical problems. They say, oh, shut up and eat your donut. And I wouldn't say that, you see, at this point. Because life, as one looks at it, you see, is in fact a celebration of itself. When you look out at night at the stars and you really wonder, good God, what is all that about? Well, it's a firework display. And it's celebrating High Holy Day. It's whoopee. And the whole world is whoopee. It's a kind of exuberance. And therefore the proper function of religion is digging this. It's not seeking. It's not seeking anything, but is, in a way, thanksgiving. That's why, of course, the Christians were right in calling the Mass the Eucharist, the thanksgiving. Only they had such a complicated way of thinking about it that nobody could understand it. So in religion, all religious exercises, whether they are meditative or whether they are ritualistic, are whoopee. They are not something you do in order to attain anything. They are like art forms, like dancing. They are expressive of attainment, of the attainless attainment. So here's another hang-up for you. When you go to Mr. Suzuki, who runs the Zen Center, he's a good disciple of Dogen, who brought Zen, a certain school of Zen to Japan in the 13th century. Dogen said, you can't sit and meditate unless you're already a Buddha. In which case, why meditate? Well, meditation is just the way a Buddha sits. And he called this sitting just to sit, not to attain enlightenment. Because the minute you do that, you see, you're not meditating. So you only become a good meditator if you're not looking for anything. And therefore, you realize what a great thing it is to be able to sit. And what a great thing it is not to dissect the world with your analytical intellect. To be able to look out at the water or the trees or at the floor and the light on it in front of you without calling it light or floor or trees or thinking that it has parts or thinking that it's complicated. It isn't. So when you can sit without thinking, not with an empty mind, mind you, I'm going back to that point, not with an empty mind, but just a non-analytic mind, a non-probing mind, where you're not creating problems all the time by trying to control it, by trying to control your mind, by trying to control your experience, what you see and hear. You then just simply discover that there is no way of controlling what you're experiencing, because what you're experiencing is you. And to try and really fundamentally control that is just going around in a circle. So if I would say to you now, what you have to learn is to let it happen, that's wrong too. There's no one to let it happen. If I say to you, accept your experience, be calm and open to things, that again perpetuates the illusion that you're something different from it. And so we go round and round. But if there are some people who want to get together, and like we would get together to play poker, or to have a walk, go fishing, or sail a boat, if there are some people who want to get together to meditate, and to have rituals, and to chant, great. It's an art form. And you can only use it and make it a good art form if you're not using it to get something. And this is what really is the bane of temples all over the world. You go into Buddhist temples where they theoretically don't believe in any God. But there are the people praying. And they're all doing it in order that we get a male child next time around, or that the horse recover from a disease, or that mama gets cured of the dropsy, and all these petitions are going on and on and on. People are always coming to the temple to ask for something. Lowbrow people for lowbrow things, highbrow people for highbrow things. And there all the vendors sit outside and sell souvenirs and magic and charms, and all the people go in and do this. And all these serious priests sitting there, really having to keep up face and say, yes, we can provide these services. On the other hand, if you go in to one of these temples, along with all the faithful followers, and have a ball, buy a bead, buy a candle, buy this, buy that, buy some incense, go in, and dig this great thing going on, salute the Buddhas, or the altars, or the crucifixes, or what you will. But don't take it seriously. And this is one of the great important transformations of today in our consciousness, is that a great many people are finding out that religion is not supposed to be taken seriously. This is a shocking thing to many people. There used to be an old saying that a religion is dead when the priests laugh across the altars. That's true in one sense. When the priests know that they've got a racket going, and they don't believe one word of it, and they're laughing across the altar because of all these suckers around doing it, then it's true. The religion is dead. But when the priests laugh at the altars, because they're having such fun, because this whole scene is so beautiful, well, it's the difference between some stuffy old Buddhist priest humming a sutra and Allen Ginsberg chanting a sutra. That's a thing to hear. Because it's people going, they go on for interminably. It's a bore. They're sick of it. But they get paid for it. This is magical. But when Allen Ginsberg chants the sutra, everybody gets in a circle and he gets these little bells, and they get going. It's just like a jam session, where everybody is absolutely delighted. Well, that's the way to do it. And if you can't do it that way, forget it. Lao Tzu puts it in this way: the great Tao flows everywhere, both to the left and to the right. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And when merits are accomplished, it lays no claim to them. The more, therefore, you relinquish power, trust others, the more powerful you become. But in such a way that instead of having to lie awake nights, controlling everything, you do it beautifully by trusting the job to everyone else. And they carry it on for you. So you can go to sleep at night and trust your nervous system to wake you up in the morning. You can even tell it, I want to wake up at 6 o'clock, and it'll wake you up just like an alarm clock. This seems a sort of paradox to say this, but the principle of unity, of coming to a sense of oneness with the whole of the rest of the universe, is not to try to obtain power over the rest of the universe. That will only disturb it and antagonize it and make it seem less one with you than ever. The way to become one with the universe is to trust it as another, as you would another, and say, let's see what you're going to do. But in doing that, you see, in saying that to everything else that you have been taught to think is not you, you are also saying it to yourself. Because finally, as I pointed out, you do not know where your decisions come from. They pop up like hiccups. And when you make a decision, people have a great deal of anxiety about making decisions. There's this guy farmer, who ordered a help man to come in. and found he was an extraordinarily efficient worker, because the first day he put him on sawing logs. And he sawed more logs than anybody had ever sawed. It was fantastic. But it was all done in one day. So the next day he put him on to mending fences. And there were all kinds of broken fences around the farm, and in one day he had the whole thing done. So he thought, what am I going to do with this guy? So he took him down into a basement and said, look, here are all the potatoes that have come in from this harvest. And I want you to sort them into 3 groups. Those that we sell, those that we use for seeding, and those that we throw away. So he left him at that. At the end of the day, the laborer came back and said, well, that's enough, mister. I quit. Oh, he said, you can't quit. I've never had such an excellent worker. I'll raise your salary. I'll do anything to keep you around here. I said, no. It's all right mending fences and chopping wood, but this potato business is decision after decision after decision after decision. So when we decide, we're always worrying, did I think this over long enough? Did I take enough data into consideration? And if you think it through, you find you never could take enough data into consideration. The data for a decision in any given situation is infinite. So what you do is, you go through the motions of thinking out what you will do about this. And then when the time comes to act, you make a snap judgment. I mean, I'm speaking a little extremely, making some fun of it and so on, because after all, we do occasionally get the vague outlines of things and make a right decision on rational grounds. But we fortunately forget the variables that could have interfered with this coming out right. It's amazing how often it works. But warriors are people who think of all the variables beyond their control and what might happen. So then when you make a decision, and it works out all right, I think very little of it has much to do with your conscious intent and control. But somehow or other, you are able to decide and control things more harmoniously if you delegate authority. That's why very great businessmen are those who can delegate authority. Trust others to work for them. Because those are people developing businesses on the same basic structure that is fundamental to a living organism. Delegation of authority. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And you see, then, what is happening is this. The more you let go of it and trust it, as if it were quite other than you, the more you realize the inseparable identity of self and other. To go back, if you try to find the identity of self and other by subjecting other to self,